You look very handsome. I love this
you.
look. Yes.
Thank you.
It's like you own an art gallery and you're so sophisticated. I love it. Which you would actually, yeah, because you're an artist in many forms.
Maybe one day.
Yeah.
Not
Congratulations. Since
Hey,
we last
thank
saw
you.
you, got another Oscar.
That's
yeah.
right.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Does it feel different? Like the wins, it's for different moments in your life, different chapters?
Well, it's been a lifetime between them.
Yeah.
But it felt quite wonderful and healing in a sense that, you know, I've been doing this for a very long time, so I spent almost as long prior. I had 17 years of acting professionally before I won for The Pianist, and then it was about 22 years in between that.
Yeah.
And, you know, as an artist and an artistic profession, it's very complex and ups and downs. And
roller
so
coaster.
to have an opportunity, again, to have work that really speaks to you, that others can connect to, and that to receive the recognition from the Academy was just such a wonderful thing. And most importantly, to share it with my parents both times, which I'm so grateful
I was going to say, is it cooler? They were there with you this time as well, yeah?
It's incredible. That's the best part. You know, I wish my grandfather always wanted to be an actor, but I wish they could have seen just some of the ride of working, but to share, you know, it's such a special moment. It's one of the most special moments you know.
Yeah. I wish I would have. I have something similar. No one in my family is very musical, and apparently my grandmother was, but I never knew her. And she's the one who I got all this vinyl from and all this.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I think my more soulful vibe. She loved wine too.
You may have inherited, it may be something in there genetically anyway.
No, that's why I was like, the one I feel most connected to I never met. She was a little wild too, but that's fun. But yeah, that's more fun, right? You credit your parents, right, for your kind of your empathy and kind of who you are and your character. Can you explain that a bit? Like, one was a teacher, right? Public teacher,
Yes,
your dad?
my father is a wonderful man. My parents are still together. My dad's been just such a great pillar of strength for our family. For my mother's a very creative person. She's a photographer. And then my father is also very empathetic as a person, very concerned. He taught public school his whole life. He grew up in the Bronx. He's very, they're both quite rooted to the world around us and the hardship of others, because they've experienced quite a great deal of hardship in their lives collectively, and also they're just thoughtful human beings. And so I grew up in Queens, and I had a lot of wild friends and a lot of, you know, crazy life, but to always come home to that as a point of
as a foundation,
as a foundation, and yeah, I do credit them for
that's a beautiful thing. Not
steering
everybody
me in the right path. Yeah.
Speaking of you growing up, like in the city, like around here, I hear that you're one of those kids that would ride the subway just alone. And I have a 9 and 11-year-old here, and I'm just like.
Yeah, I was on the train at that age. Yeah, I think it was different then. I think everyone's sensibilities were slightly different, and awareness were different, right?
I mean, Dateline wasn't big yet,
That's
you know.
Right,
It's just, you didn't know.
Nobody had a cell phone either, so you couldn't really, you were just really on your own. So your parents really didn't know when you left. When I went to go hang out on Jamaica Avenue under the elevated train track, they didn't know I was getting on a train with my friend and, you know.
Oh my gosh.
Riding and going wherever,
I know, I'm by no means a helicopter mom, but like in that sense, I'm like, that's a hard no. We are back with Adrien Brody. His new play is called The Fear of 13. Previews start tomorrow on Broadway at the James Earl Jones Theater. So The Fear of 13 is an important story. Tell us about the play.
Oh, it's a remarkable play. It's a new play. We did a run in London in 2024 in the West End. But it's a story about Nick Yaris, who's a man who served 22 years on death row for a crime he didn't commit. And it speaks to, of course, the grave injustice. There are many people in those circumstances, unfortunately. His life journey is remarkable.
You got to meet him, right?
Oh, yeah, we've spent quite a bit of time together. He used to come to London. He's an advisor on the play as well, and but it's really been invaluable to spend time with him he's someone with incredible empathy and through all of his hardships in his life, and there were many prior to incarceration, there was tremendous brutality and isolation and, you know, shame that wasn't undeserved shame, and then, you know, hardships of reacclimating after spending so much time behind bars. You know, the joy of being an actor is to share stories and understand people and journeys that provide insight not only into your own good fortune, but the context of how precarious it is out there for people, and to have an understanding of those specific journeys, that you're fortunate enough not to go through those specific things, and you can relate to certain hardships that you or your family members have experienced, but to really, you know,
understand that perspective. You went and visited prisons, right?
I've spent time in London. We all went to a Supermax facility. I had spent time visiting Angola years before, and yeah, we have no shortage of prisons to visit in this country, unfortunately. Yeah.
What's something, I'm curious, like, what impacted you? Like, I remember I saw Les Mis, like, on Broadway when I was younger, and I was like, oh my God, I will be on stage in some facet, like, in my life. I have no idea how, but it was so inspiring to me. That was kind of a pivotal moment for me. What was a moment for you that you were like, oh, I must do this for a living?
It's funny. I started acting very young. I started working professionally in the theater 40 years ago. So, 1986, I was taking the train and going to work.
Wow, how young? How did you know that young?
You know, my mom had an assignment to photograph the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, which is a lovely drama school in New York, and she saw a program for young people there, and she said, she came home and she's like, all those kids are doing exactly what you do all day. She's like, and we had one friend, she had one friend who's a lovely person. Her name's Marnie Andrews, and she's a theater actress, and she got me an audition for her agency.
Yeah.
And I auditioned, and we didn't know anybody in the business, and I auditioned, and they sent me out, and I booked a few things in a slow, long journey. But
yeah.
But back
I love that you told us she had one friend. I'm still stuck on. She's like, she had one friend.
One friend who was an actress.
And this one friend.
My mom had lots of friends.
I was like, your poor mom.
My mom was very.
Really
my mom had a lot of people.
She had one friend.
My mom had one friend, and fortunately, she was an actress.
Yeah, what a relationship. That was amazing. No, just messing with you. Sorry, I'm a child.
Yes, so am I.
No, that's amazing though. I love that. Like, there was it's like. It really is about saying yes to those random opportunities. Like, even when I work with people on The Voice, I'm like, it is saying yes to things that you can't think anything is beneath you or not exactly what you want. To say yes to things and go to those auditions and do things even though nobody in your world,
and
you
try,
have no one helping.
And
like,
fail.
Exactly.
And fail. I mean,
and be brave enough to fail.
Yeah, fail.
Yeah.
That's not...
Yeah. I also heard, look, we're going to come back to this, and I didn't even mean to do this, but you were also at one point the amazing Adrian. You were into magic when you were younger?
Yes.
That's your name.
Yes.
The V started so young for you. It had to have, yeah. Who is the amazing Adrian? Was this your act?
Yeah, well, I was, forgive me, I was like 10, right? So,
but you were still amazing.
I was
the amazing.
I was the amazing.
Yeah. So you were 10. How'd you get into magic? You've always been into some kind of performance.
Another friend of my mother's, to be honest, actually.
She has two.
She had two friends.
Two.
And his name was Howard Smith. He worked at the Village Voice, and he had all this magic stuff and gizmos and weird things that I guess he liked or he had to review. I remember he had this anyway, I became obsessed at about 6 or so with magic. I'd visit her at work.
Yeah.
And then I'd torment all her coworkers. I'd learn a magic trick and I'd practice it on everyone.
Yeah.
And the thing about magic, it's wonderful. I always saw an association of transition from me doing magic to understanding performance, of somewhat creating like a monologue, capturing the attention of the adult, tricking them, so creating the illusion, and you know, and then here you go. I'm an actor.
I love that. I love that. I just love that. I picture you in 10 with the top hat and everything. I love it. Yeah.
It was like from a garage sale. I had like this. Everything was from a garage sale, but I had like a.
Me too.
Yeah, that's great.
Saturdays.
It was fun. Yeah, it was good.
Every morning. You got to get there before everyone else to get the deals.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But I had like some like satiny tux jacket that didn't quite fit great, and a hat, and.
Yeah.
But I did.
It's called character building.
And I was $50 for the whole party.
Oh yeah, there you go.
You could have got. I was amazing for $50. I wasn't the greatest magician, but it was a bargain.
Adrian isn't just an actor, though. He is a writer, a composer, a musician, a director, a magician, as we now know, as well as someone who creates paintings and mixed media pieces. We love artists who cross media and genres, so we wanted to ask him and talk to him about some of his pieces. Let's start with this one. Yeah.
Hey, cool. Thank you.
I love the color with the black and white. Like this, it's almost like graffiti, like with the. I love that.
Yeah,
Talk about this one.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up here from the 80s, taking, like I said earlier, I was taking the train all the time, and a lot of the artists in my school were graffiti writers, and so I knew a lot of people who were very much into that world and that culture, and you know, aside from looking at people all the time, I was always looking at graffiti everywhere, and at that time there was a lot. You know, New York was very vibrant and different, and felt like the New York of. It was my youth, but the New York of my youth was really
gritty.
something. Like Times Square was really something then.
Yeah.
Dangerous, but really amazing, exciting.
Yeah.
But good, right?
Yeah.
So Marilyn is quite symbolic to me. It first of all represents illusion and misunderstanding, partially in the entertainment business, but also of what we are fed as truths and what we absorb as truth and what is the reality. And so Marilyn is probably the most famous actor in the world, I would imagine, and her image is, ubiquitous, but she had a very tormented life, and, and one that was somewhat unfulfilled creatively, partially because she was a very attractive woman, and so she was kind of only afforded certain roles that they wanted to perpetuate,
that
a kind of image of a blonde, not as, as bright and complex as she wanted to be. And she really loved acting, and she loved the craft of acting. And so I always witness her somewhat torn and damaged from her real existence, rather than the kind of idyllic image that's perpetuated. So that's what that kind of speaks to for me. And I did play Arthur Miller, who was her husband on a film. And so she became a subject for mine. And within it tucked is all kinds of elements of hardship, addiction, things within that. And there's beauty within that, but there's fragility, and there's kind of tragedy within it as well.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't know too, like growing up, a lot about Dolly, but we were always sold that image with Dolly Parton as like the like kind of, flighty blonde, like whatever, and very sweet and whatever, even with the Porter Wagner days, all that stuff. And I think the same kind of thing. She's highly intelligent, very witty. Like she was so much more than I think we knew. And like later on, we got to know that. Fortunately, because she still was around. But I'd feel like when people pass away so young, you are only sold this like filtered version that you were fed. But for some reason, that relates to me with Dolly as well. But here's the next piece of art. Love that, with the hummingbirds and everything. Yeah.
So this piece is very personal to me. So my mother took this photograph of Basquiat. This is her photograph. She had an assignment to photograph him in 1986. Wow. The same year I started acting in theater, she took this photograph of Basquiat. So I grew up with this image, and he's an influence in my life creatively, obviously, in his work, and his work also was quite visible in the streets in the early days, and he kind of used that as a tool. He was a really, obviously, talented, but he used that street palette to kind of build visibility and kind of street credibility, but he was a wonderful artist, obviously, even when he was writing Samo and catching tags on the street. But this is somewhat both my mother as an influence and guiding light in my life, and honoring Basquiat also in that sense, and how creativity kind of kills us in a way, like he kind of overpowered himself with so much of that, and he has a wound on his stomach that you don't often see, and so I have kind of sharks and snakes attacking from him within, but you know.
I love it.